as part of this call. So just very briefly, I've told you, my name's Karen Christensen. I founded the Train Campaign in 2011. I do this as a volunteer. All the people you see here are doing this work as volunteers. I'm actually a publisher and an author focused on global issues, especially China and sustainability. I live in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. I'm quite New York oriented, which is in part what got me involved in thinking about the value of better train service here. This summer, I'm very fortunate to have a group of interns working with me. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. One of the interesting things that we've had made possible this year by doing remote internships is we have people from other parts of the country. Ethan, you want to go ahead? Oh, you're muted.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ethan Michalowski. I'm currently living in Wisconsin, but I am a second year at Yale University in Connecticut, which is where I first experienced how wonderful, interregional rail travel could be. And after seeing this internship, I was incredibly excited to help promote this sustainable form of public transportation. Thank you.
And Graham?
I'm Graham Lewis. I'm a econ and math, Georgia Tech. I live in Savannah, Georgia. And I was really interested. I actually spent some time studying China last year and was really interested at seeing a group that was trying to get trains done in a sustainable and realistic way for the region of the Northeast. That's what drew me to this campaign. And I'm very excited about the summer.
One of these days we'll get these guys actually to the Berkshires. We'll all ride the train. That's what I'm looking forward to. But for now, we're working remotely, but still very much focused on, well, thinking globally, acting locally. So what I'm going to do is I have a PowerPoint presentation that includes a couple of film clips. I've tried to focus it on Berkshire County and some of the issues in northern Berkshire County, because that's where we are in spirit tonight. And then after that, we'll have some time for discussion. So I'm going to now share my screen. And I've asked the interns to text me if something goes wrong, because when this happens, go live, I have to, okay, hang on a sec. Let me see if I can see this. I'm just trying to stream and it's not going to work because it's more complicated. All right, forget that. We are going to the PowerPoint. So we're not streaming this live. That is a more complicated system than I realized. Welcome to the train campaign. This photograph I took about the time I started. These are some of the tracks in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. You have anyone who has spent time in the Berkshires has probably seen tracks like this. They say that some of the track in Connecticut was around when Custer made his last stand in the 19th century. Many of these tracks are 100 years old. This is Mount Greylock. This is where we would be tonight for this conversation, and where we will hope to reconvene sometime. The beautiful Berkshires. We're doing this particular webinar in partnership with Bascom Lodge on Mount Greylock. Bascom Lodge is an ardent supporter of bringing rail service back to Western Massachusetts, and it will be opening for the 2020 season on Friday, July 3rd. It will be open 5 days a week from Wednesday through Sunday until mid-October. And the link is bascomlodge.net. Really delighted to be able to do this. And a couple more pictures of the lodging and accommodation. It does look wonderful, doesn't it? Now here we come to the train campaign's beginnings. They did begin in China. The campaign began because I was in China and traveled by train from Shanghai to Hangzhou, which is the city where several big tech companies, Alibaba and Tencent, are based. And it was an absolutely gorgeous spring day in a lovely place, and we zipped down there. And then I had my meetings. I went went back to Shanghai. And all I could think is that the Berkshires is very beautiful too. It's not got as much space. It's not the same scale as China, but I thought, what would be possible if we were more connected to the world? I had flown from Beijing, I think at that time, and then walked next door, caught the train. So what I did was wrote a newsletter, started a blog, started an online petition, and had T-shirts printed. And I dragged my staff out in the snow onto the tracks for our first photo op, 2011. So our mission is to foster rail networks that connect communities across the Northeast. We want to support rural communities and small cities by connecting them to urban centers. This is Bob Rush down in New Milford, Connecticut, who's been working to restore rail service ever since the trains stopped running, which is about 50 years. And this is when I went to the climate march in New York last September. Now I'm going to show you a first film clip. This is one with Simon Winchester. And just excuse me, I have to flip to this. The slogan of the train campaign is "Bring back the trains."
And what we're all about is to try and bring trains back here and all the way up through the Berkshires to Pittsfield in central Massachusetts.
Sometimes people think that we mean something nostalgic, that we're just trying to go back to the past. But although indeed we want to bring back trains that ran here until 1972, we are thinking of the future. Those of us who travel the world know that train travel is 21st century travel.
For over 100 years, trains traveled all over Berkshire County, connecting its towns and villages to each other and to the big cities. The impressive railroad stations became the hubs of major rail routes, linking them to the more local mode of transportation, the electric streetcar. But by 1971, most forms of passenger rail travel, both train and streetcar, had disappeared.
And now I'm going to come back to my PowerPoint. I haven't figured out how to integrate this and stream it through Zoom. That's a challenge. This is a map from an organization called Rebooting New England from 2018. And when I first met them down in Connecticut, this was the map they put up. And you'll see I've written marginalized or invisible here because you see this great high-speed route from New York to Boston. Their idea is to connect the old industrial cities of the Northeast and create a powerhouse, make New England a powerhouse again. But look out in Western Massachusetts, Western Connecticut, especially Western Massachusetts, there's nothing there. But I talked to them and their map now shows east-west service to Pittsfield. It shows the Housatonic or Berkshire Line. And there's even now an effort to bring back service. It's actually not just from Greenfield to North Adams, but all the way from Boston out to North Adams on a line that now has only freight trains. So it's quite similar to the Housatonic. Most of this talk is going to focus on the Housatonic Line because that is the line that is the central sort of spine of Berkshire County, the traditional rail connector for us out here in Western Mass. Our initiatives, we've been doing this for a while. This was the sort of sub-zero rally in North Canaan. We've been doing a lot of studies. We've submitted legislation to the Senate and the House in Massachusetts, which has been, obviously things have been delayed because of COVID-19, but it's actually been passed favorably from committee to committee. And you can help us by supporting that with your legislators. We hold a lot of community events. We will be broadcasting a film soon, streaming it live with discussion for the first time ever. And we're working on a film that's focused on showing the real benefits, the dynamic potential there is in restoring passenger rail. Here's a map of not just the Housatonic Railroad in 1881, but it shows you how connected we were by rail. In fact, there are many, many smaller lines that aren't showing there. You'll see that the old line actually branched off to West Stockbridge as well as going up to Pittsfield. And the professor from Williams College you heard narrating in that bit of film, he actually has written an article, a rather wonderful article about riding the creeper to get to college at Williams back in I think before World War II. The Housatonic Railroad was actually chartered in 1836, and it ran from Pittsfield to New York City. It provided passenger service till 1971. 1971 is really the key year. It's the year that all the remaining private railroads were taken under the Amtrak umbrella. So that was the year when everything changed. But on the other hand, freight rail has continued and has prospered. And this is a fabulous thing because on a line like the Housatonic or the Pan Am line that goes to North Adams, it means that there is existing rail, existing property, existing legal right-of-way. So it makes restoring train service on these lines relatively easy compared to anything that would require purchasing land. This is, these are just some old timetables. I found the one on the left is hanging on the wall at a restaurant bar in New Milford. New Milford, Connecticut is very keen to have passenger rail restored. They feel it would be transformative in ways very similar to, to our perception. Now, there was a film made on the last run to Pittsfield in 1971. And what I'm going to do, we've made a 3-minute extract, not the whole documentary, and I'm going to show you that by once again getting out of my PowerPoint. And
all done, 120 years of service, all gone.
You're sure it's the last time?
Well, we've had 4 last runs, but this is the last run. This is the definite last run.
How do you feel?
Not too happy about it.
Right.
I'm going to miss the run very much. It's
How long have you been on it?
about 3.5 years as an engineer, and I fired up here for 12 years.
12 years.
And
You remember the first time you drove it as an engineer?
yes, back in October '67, and I was nervous as heck because I've handled freight trains before, but I never handled a passenger train, all by myself.
And it's different.
It's much different. You have to take in consideration you've got people instead of boxcars behind you.
So how did it go, the first run?
Did very well, on time. That's what counts,
Yeah.
on time. But I'm going to miss the runs here now. I've grown to like this line. In fact, love it, as a matter of fact. Well, you better get on board. We've got just about a minute left.
Okay.
Don't want to leave you.
Okay, that's right.
We need the money.
Okay.
The train engineer Pete McLaughlin is driving today doesn't have a name but a number. It's called 136 North, and it runs 89 miles from Danbury, Connecticut to Pittsfield, Massachusetts. The route it takes has served this region for 130 years. It was first called the Housatonic Railroad after the famous river it follows most of its length. It then became the New Haven, and finally the Penn Central. But by those who wrote it and worked it, it has always been known as the Berkshire Line. In its prime, when 25 trains a day once passed through Danbury, it carried thousands of people from New York and Long Island to the hotels and resorts of the Berkshire Hills. In 1965, service was cut to weekends. In 69, they took off the parlor cars and diners. And all that's left now is a single, self-propelled diesel car.
You gotta work on a weekend. This is the run to work. I mean, it's not working really. It's a picnic, an outing. It's a lot of fun. You meet a lot of people. And like I said, if you got to work on a Sunday and a weekend, this is the run to do it.
You think they'll ever bring the line back?
Maybe not for quite a while. It may in some future years, but I don't really think so. I think this is the last run.
And so, one fine day in the 1970s, 250,000 people in Western Connecticut and Massachusetts lost a piece of their history and commerce. Most of them didn't even notice. But perhaps someday, they will want it back.
That was the last train to Pittsfield. And right there, I've taken a clip from that film, and that's Engineer Pete, who was driving, Pete McLaughlin. Well, when we show this film on July 8th, we will also introduce you to Pete, Engineer Pete, again, because he is still around and still talking about trains. This is a photograph from when we did a shoot with him at the Danbury Rail Museum, interviewing him about his memories of driving the train. So we have quite a bit of Pete today to share with you as well. Now there's a lot of current progress on the Housatonic Line. If you live in or spend your time in the Northern County, you may not have seen it. It's much more obvious to us down here because the actual line up to Pittsfield is running through our towns. It was purchased, that the 37 miles within Massachusetts was purchased by the Commonwealth in 2014 under the leadership of Governor Deval Patrick, with the explicit intention of seeing passenger service to New York restored. And the total commitment that was made by the Commonwealth at that point was $113 million. But that was, part of that was contingent on Connecticut's participation. And that has not yet been worked out. But on the other hand, the actual work of upgrading our portion of the line to passenger standard got underway in 2018. I have a couple pictures to show you. The one at the top, if you see the little golden thing at the bottom of the top picture, that's some of the new rail that's been going in. So this is continuing even through this COVID-19 period. There are new ties, there are cars with new ties coming in. So a great deal is being done. It's and being done at a very reasonable price as well for such things. And we last year submitted a bill to the Massachusetts legislature to fund a study of the line that would update the studies done in 2010, but would also focus on issues that are of greater concern to us now. In particular, the environmental benefits to be derived from passenger train service, and a much more substantial look at the economic and social benefits of improved transportation. And as I said, that is one of the things that's going on that's very positive for this particular project. This was done by it was the Berkshire Chamber of Commerce at the time. It's One Berkshire now. They have a young leaders group, and they put together this infographic that looks that just gives the numbers, the increase in taxes, the jobs created, the economic activity that's generated when you have better transportation, more connectivity to major urban centers, reduced carbon emission, decreased costs in road maintenance and the costs of fatal accidents. So, and one of the things that we found very interesting in that 2010 study, there was a market research done find out what people wanted in train service, and the demographics were interesting because the people in 2010 who wanted to ride the train, their average age was 36, which you'll know is young for the Berkshires. Train travel is particularly attractive to younger people who are by no means as inclined as I was to get a driver's license and to think that one has to have a car. And that makes a huge difference to where we should be spending our transportation dollars. This is a photograph. I've become obsessed by steel and railroad ties. This is modern steel rail, modern, it's called welded rail. These pieces came in on special cars in 2018. They're quarter-mile pieces of steel, and they were laid along the track on both sides, all the way from the border with Connecticut up to Pittsfield, and cut to fit the sidings and the crossings. And they're still there. It's the way this works. You have those down. And then the ties are replaced, or most of them are replaced. Some 50,000 have been replaced now. And then they in stages start replacing the rail with the new rail. The old jointed rail is about 25 feet in length. The clickety-clack of old-fashioned trains, that's going to be the thing of the past. If you love the clickety-clack, you're going to have to listen to it on YouTube or enjoy it now, because it simply isn't going to be happening later. The new beds are more stable, and the pieces, these quarter-mile pieces, are welded together, so it's very smooth, much smoother ride, which means it's quieter. So that's the Housatonic Line. You will be hearing, and I probably have seen in the press, that there's also a major study that's been going on, $1 million study of the options for drastically improving rail service between Boston and Pittsfield. There is, in fact, I should have done this as a poll. How many people know there actually is a train between Pittsfield and Boston? When we have public meetings, I always ask that question. And if there's one or two people who even know that it exists, I'm surprised. And there's maybe there'll be one person who's ever taken it. It's once a day. It's called the Lakeshore Limited. It's the times are very inconvenient. They certainly will never get you. I thought about it, and I think to do what I was going to do, I was going to have to spend 2 nights in Boston. And the Lakeshore Limited is called by the rail guys, the train guys, I'm told, the Late Shore Limited, because it is perennially late. It has one of the worst on-time ratings of any train in the Amtrak system. And this is one of the issues that comes up on on a line that has a big freight company on it, like that line. One of the major freight companies in the United States is CSX. And you're having to coordinate with CSX, and CSX considers itself to be very much the dominant partner, although legally they are required to give precedence to passenger trains. It doesn't happen. So that's a problem, and it's one of the reasons that the Housatonic Line is a very attractive one for upgrading, because it only has very few trains run by a small private company. So doing an upgrade there and coordinating passenger service with freight on the Housatonic Line will be, by comparison, an absolute piece of cake. The East-West Rail study has been extremely controversial, and we will be happy. I'm not going to go into the details. We'd be happy to send you information. There's been a massive amount of press in the Boston Globe as well as in every other paper that covers such matters in the state. And there was a great amount of pushback, some of it led by our own Senator Adam Hines, and by the one Berkshire was very much involved in preparing a document to kind of get the study back on track. That has been quite successful, and for other reasons, in fact, connected with COVID-19, which I'll explain in a moment, that it would seem that we are going to see an actual plan for improved and fairly high speed, not high speed in this Chinese sense, but I mean a very modern and very usable, practical service from Pittsfield into Boston. And this is the third leg, this North Adams route. Now, I first heard about it from a former train engineer, Amtrak engineer, who came to one of the pop-up meetings we held a couple of years ago. And he said, you know, there's this Pan Am line that goes up through the northern part of the state. And it goes to North Adams, it goes to Pownell, and it goes over to Schenectady. He said, you know, there should be passenger trains on that, connect that whole part of the region. And it seemed a very interesting idea, but fortunately, it attracted the concept was also being talked about by other people, and it attracted the attention of a new state senator in Northampton, Senator Jo Comerford, and she took it up and actually has got a bill passed that would fund a study of restoring service on that line. Really it's very similar to the situation with the Housatonic Line. So that's promising for North County. Then moving forward, the upgrades continue. Mass DOT is finalizing alternatives for the East-West Rail project. We've been continuing to meet with people in Connecticut and working with both planning people, community leaders, and legislators there, because obviously getting Connecticut on board is very important. But there are bigger things afoot. Funding for rail was an important part of the CARES package that was passed. I think it was in May. And in a more directly relevant development is the congressman for Western Massachusetts and Berkshire County is Richard Neal. And he is the chair of the Ways and Means Committee in the House of Representatives. This is a position that this means that the infrastructure bill that we have been hearing about from both parties for some years now is actually something that has to go through the Ways and start with the Ways and Means Committee. And Congressman Neal has announced and is going to submit formally next week, I believe, the Moving Forward Act, which is a $1.2 trillion infrastructure package. Now, it's to do all kinds of things. I think many of us agree that that American infrastructure is woefully neglected. Trains are only a part of that, but it has very substantial funding for rail systems for all the reasons we've mentioned. But it's also because Congressman Neal understands the needs of Western Massachusetts and has paid careful attention and devoted his staff time to looking at the East-West Rail proposal. He's become very actively involved in ensuring that study becomes an actual project proposal that makes sense and that can be accomplished in a reasonable period of time, and that's really ready to go and ready to be part of this initiative. So we have a powerful advocate in Washington. We have other powerful advocates in Washington, actually, but Certainly Congressman Neal is the most important of them right now. We are working in Connecticut. These are just a couple of photos. I get really nostalgic when I look at these photos from an event last summer in Canaan when I was meeting with the state rep Maria Horn, or holding an event in New Milford, because we can't do these things right now. And we're together online. I'm glad to be with you this evening. Just to emphasize again, this is a bumper sticker that we had made. I'd rather be riding the train. And a sustainable future depends on rail. It is only one type of connectivity, but it is an absolutely crucial kind of connectivity for both our economic welfare, but also for a future in which we can cope with the challenge of climate change and improve public health as well. That's a very substantial component of what we're doing. The issues of equity, especially in public health, very important. And we're working now in coalition with others. We've formed a Western Mass Rail Coalition with groups in the Pioneer Valley and further east. And we're now part of Transportation for Massachusetts. I'm also quite involved with the National Rail Passengers Association, which is based in Washington. So we're working on all fronts. We appreciate your being with us. We will appreciate your questions and your ideas, and we welcome your support. And now I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we're going to go to some conversation. Now, I wonder if, okay, now I have, so it looks like we have some chat and questions. Malcolm, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hey everybody, sorry I'm late. My name is Malcolm Ferguson. I'm a political science and English double major at the University of Maryland. Just started working train campaign about a month ago. I live in DC most of the time, so I've had a lot of experience taking the metro there. And I've had a lot of thoughts and a lot of I guess a lot of thought-provoking instances that have got me interested in transportation planning, and I'm really excited to be working with the train campaign.
One of the great things for me about having the interns this summer is they all have a really serious economic interest in economics and the policy sides of it, the kind of things that are the kind of nitty-gritty of it. I mean, just to emphasize, this isn't nostalgic. We're focused on doing something that is of real benefit to as many people as possible, and it's been really fun. And in addition to doing these webinars, we're doing a lot of research. We hope to pull together things that larger organizations might not have put together in a way that is as accessible as some of you listening to this might want. We want to make it possible for everyone, every citizen, to understand and weigh the costs and benefits of any rail proposal, any transportation proposal. So how should we kick this off? I think it's better if we have one. Do we have some questions?
Yeah, there are two in the Q&A portion right now that we can take a look at.
Oh, right. So this question, am I saying that nothing can happen until Connecticut agrees? Do they have any dollars? Now it's a very interesting issue. The single thing that I found most people remember about the train project, that is, I mean, until recently, was they'd say, Massachusetts people say, Connecticut won't pay. Because I guess that's what was in the press. It's a little more complicated than that. Indeed, Connecticut has had serious economic challenges, and Connecticut is like Massachusetts in that they have urban rail systems that suck up money. They're black holes. And I could go into some of the ways in which that is unfair to areas like ours. But there's also the the argument that was made by the previous governor of Connecticut, Daniel Malloy, who said that the Berkshires, i.e. Massachusetts, would benefit more from the restoration of this service. And so it wasn't fair to just say they should pay half. I think that part of the problem was a matter of people not being willing to come to the table and discuss it. It's remarkably hard to get states to work together. I think this is something that I, as a citizen, had no idea that, and I think it is because rail is quite different. Highways, essentially, states can build their highways, and you know how you drive across a state border, and the road is good on one side, and then suddenly you're in potholes because the other state or the next town hasn't paid. Graham, I see this. I'll let you jump in.
Oh no, I was trying to mark it showing that you had answered it live, just so
I
if
see.
anyone hopped on later.
I'm
sorry for that. I didn't know to say that I would be answering it.
I see. Okay. So that is something where I think things could have been worked out, because really the amount of money that is required to do the work on this line, the total figure was the estimate was $250 million, and Massachusetts was already committing over $100 million. But things have changed now. That indeed the states may not have any more money, but a federal infrastructure bill will both enable states or perhaps push states to cooperate more effectively. It also, the bill that has been proposed, and actually Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts and Rep. Seth Moulton of Massachusetts have proposed bills also on rail, and they all are, they contain, parts of them are about connecting rural areas and smaller cities. They have a modern focus. They're not just trying to connect big places or focused solely on metropolitan areas. So there really is a change of mindset about this. One of the things that I was told by Congressman Neal's office last week, and we haven't seen the language yet, is that there's going to be a specific provision for funding urban rail systems that want to extend into rural areas, i.e. if the MTA wanted to come up into Connecticut, extend the line into Connecticut through Connecticut to connect. And the same thing could happen from Boston. So that's going to be really interesting to see. So I'm pleased to think that we're going to have some change. So there are really some very interesting things ahead. Big challenges, but big opportunities as well. The next question. I don't know if everyone can see the questions, but I'm going to read it. I think it's good for us to have it in the recording of the program. This is from William Clark. I'm very passionate about renewable energy sources, and I really appreciate the relative speed of electric trains and their ability to increase frequency of service. Are there any plans by the train campaign to advocate for electrification on the Housatonic or the East-West Rail study? Electrification is a big topic of conversation. I think everyone agrees that electrification is desirable and it's where we want to aim. I think there's no argument about that. There are two issues. One that, because I work on sustainability, is I always say, where does the electricity come from? If the electricity is not coming from renewable sources, it doesn't do you any good. I mean, it is not an environmental benefit. There's an assumption made there that about the source of electricity that we shouldn't make. We need to, those two things need to be looked at together. The other thing is that to electrify a line is about $5 million a mile. I was just on a call and was given that as a round figure. So it really does add a good deal to the cost. not to say it shouldn't be done. I think everyone agrees it should be done eventually. So it's probably a matter of timing. I don't know what the procedure is. The other thing is, of course, with any kind of infrastructure project, how do you keep everything going while you make improvements? And this is a big challenge, especially for urban rail systems where there's, you know, millions of commuters every day, people dependent on the trains to get to work. How do they make improvements? Like the escalator at Penn Station that they couldn't fix for 2 years because they couldn't, you know, they had to keep one going and they couldn't get parts because it was 100 years old. So it can be tricky, but yes, we are all for electrification.
I have a question that's typically, or it was, I've seen a lot over posts and things, and I was wondering if you could kind of go into high-speed rail, because, you know, it's currently a topic of debate for the Pittsfield line. And
yeah.
About cost.
Yes, there were
pros and cons.
There were, you know, the argument for high-speed rail is that if you could have service from Springfield to Boston in an hour and a half, you know, it's sort of that people could commute. They could live in Springfield and actually work every day in Boston. And that would change the balance, the population balance. But high-speed rail, some countries have high-speed rail. China is the one I'd ridden on. And frankly, when I came back from China to New York and got on Metro North, and all I could think about was, I wanted a high-speed train up to the Berkshires. But somebody pointed out that there, you know, look around, there are mountains and rivers. It's not a lovely flat plain. And in the United States, we cannot, in China, the government owns the land. The government can do what it wants. We do not have, you know, we have a very different system. So it's much, much, much more challenging and far more expensive. But on the east-west, the Boston to Pittsfield service, there have been strong proponents for high speed. And the proposal for high speed rail was option 6, or is option 6. This is still before the committee. And option 6 was high speed rail, $25 billion. It would be a whole new line cut along the Mass Turnpike and going to Lee, Massachusetts, and then having a sort of side service up to Pittsfield, or maybe on the Housatonic Line up to Pittsfield. So there are a variety of problems with it. The cost being one, the length of time it would take to achieve that being another. But one of the big reasons that people are opposed to it, including Congressman Neal, is that it would take the stops out of the town centers. As he said, they've just built a beautiful new Union Station in Springfield, and if you put in the high-speed train on this option, it wouldn't go to Union Station. It would be plunked somewhere, 10 miles north on the Mass Pike. And in environmental terms, that doesn't make sense. It means you're not kind of getting people where they want to be. That's why there's something called TOD, transit-oriented development, that you're trying to set up transportation and connect it with development so that the total environmental impact is as little as possible, but the benefits to society, benefits to individuals, benefits to communities are as great as possible. You know, you maximize your return. So you may hear more about high-speed rail. The Rebooting New England people use a term that I like. They talk about high performance. We don't want lousy trains. We don't want really slow trains. We want trains that will do the job, be comfortable, provide the amenities, reasonable amenities at a reasonable cost, and that can be implemented fairly quickly. that's one of the things that comes up. We don't want something that's in 10 years or 20 years. We need something sooner, and we can have something sooner. I see another question here from Dennis Sears.
I think there are a few more questions.
Sorry? Sorry, Graham? About electrification?
Oh, I said, yeah, that's what I was.
You assume that starting with non-electric technology would still end up being carbon negative? Oh yes, absolutely. There's no question that that putting in rail, it depends. You know, there's so many factors. I mean, it's crucial that you put trains in where there will be ridership for them. I read an article about the Chinese trains, and it said that when they, you know, when they travel routes that are full of people and they replace, especially when they replace flights as well as replace car travel, they are indeed very beneficial. They reduce emissions, reduce carbon output. So very positive. But but if China builds, as it sometimes does, you know, high-speed rail out to someplace that they plan to have people, that is not going to offer the same benefits. But probably at least probably a third the emissions on, you know, is one number I've seen. This is the kind of detail that we want to get some more accurate numbers on, but yes, indeed. And then we have something from Carl Schuster. Working from home is attractive and realistic for more folks than ever. Western Massachusetts is increasingly seen as within occasional commuting distance. This phenomenon is causing a boomlet in residential real estate sales. Does this development provide additional emphasis for the renewal of service to the Berkshires? It absolutely does. It's one of the great surprises to me from this period. I live in Great Barrington, and there are suddenly all these people here who are working remotely and thinking, wow, I could do this. I was talking to a neighbor who's a professor in New York and who has been spending weekends here for years and years. And she said, we would just love to reverse things, to spend 5 days a week here, go into New York for a couple of days a week. And this is actually beneficial this concept is beneficial in all kinds of ways. Because in Boston in particular, perhaps even more than New York, Boston has the worst traffic congestion of any city in the country, worse than Los Angeles. And it just getting worse and worse. And very high property prices. It actually makes it hard for the businesses the major businesses, including the Boston Chamber of Commerce, are in favor of East-West Rail. This was before COVID-19, because they see that people, in order for businesses to prosper in Boston, they need to be able to attract talent. And they aren't going to be able to attract talent if the kind of young professionals they're trying to get and older professionals they're trying to get to come to Boston say it's just an impossible place to live. It's too expensive. The commute's too terrible. We won't talk about the weather, but it makes it hard for business. Businesses need, big city businesses need good transportation, and they need people to be able to afford to live and get to work. So there's my passion is an improved, a 21st century rural-urban connection, a positive rural-urban connection. And I see that transformation happening more and more quickly now than ever. Hybrid diesel electric engines, I believe that's what is used now on the Metro North line from Wassaic. But thank you, Karen Delory. I'm not an expert on engines. I hear a lot about DUIs. There are various interesting kinds of trains that are made in Europe. And we've been hearing, and Siemens has been trying to break into the US market. They have trains. I was in England and traveling in the north, and I got to a station and walked across the platform to the next train, and it was a DMU. I don't know what DMU stands for. Mobile unit, something, maybe diesel mobile unit. But it's simply a train car that drives by itself. So it's not a train of cars. Thank you, diesel multiple unit. Thank you. And so there's a lot of talk about using those. There are actually some old and refurbished ones we've heard of in Vermont. And there's some talk about when the Housatonic Line, the Berkshire Line in Berkshire County is upgraded, even if the work is not done in Connecticut, that we could have intra-county service, from down perhaps to Sheffield, but, between Great Barrington, Lee, Lenox, and Pittsfield. That's certainly something that's possible. Or it could connect with the East-West line as well. And then we have a question about shuttle buses through the smaller towns that don't have stations. Well, this is a very important and interesting question. There's a lot of discussion going on. There's all over the state. There are Berkshire Regional Transportation Authorities, the RTAs, and every part of Massachusetts has an RTA, and they run the buses. And there's a lot of discussion about how to improve this and create more flexible systems. They're certainly working on it. I'm hoping that I think the RTAs are getting some funding through some of these relief packages as well. It's that coordination and cooperation do remain challenges. We have these separate entities, and I'm not sure that they work together as well as they should. But you can have, I'm trying to think if it was the Pioneer Valley, somewhere is not just having buses, but having some kind of car services, so that people have at the most of, the most efficient way to move people around, especially in rural communities where people are spread out and there aren't that many people, that just running lots of buses that, in fact, that's what's true in Great Barrington. I think a lot of the time the buses are empty, are nearly empty. That maybe some other system would be more practical. So I think we're going to see a lot of changes in the way we look at transport, and that's where the kind of interests I think that this intern team brings, flexible thinking, and creative thinking about solutions that really are attuned to the particular circumstances. I will say that I think the Housatonic Line the restoration of the Housatonic Line is the best possible model for the restoration of rail service between a city and a rural area. It is relatively cheap. New York is a city where people are used to using public transportation. I think it will transform an area we're the only county with a declining population, and yet everyone says it's a wonderful place to live, but it's not a wonderful place to work. We can make it a place where people can have jobs, either remote jobs or smaller businesses can move here, and people can have jobs here. We can create much more dynamic communities. And you interns, feel free to break in if I'm not seeing all these chats. And we're almost out of time, darn it. There's a question about getting Metro North to come further north. I assume you mean on the Harlem line from Wasaig. That is a kind of technically impossible, virtually impossible, but it is something that comes up a lot. We've written a little bit about it on the website, and we'd be glad to send you a link. Are there any other questions in the chat here that I need to know? Looks like not. Good. Well, let me thank all of you. We have one more question from Dennis Sears. Any studies of people's interest in upgrading the Housatonic Line? We have not done a study. I can tell you that when we did an online petition, that was over 5 years ago, and had some 5,000 signatures. That amongst the comments, many comments, there were loads of people from New York. But no, it's very anecdotal at the moment. But there's no question, when I talk to people, the neighbor I mentioned, she said it would, if there was a train, that would make all the difference. If there was a train, especially for New Yorkers. I mean, for people who are used to living in a city and getting around using public transportation, and for people who are working and who can get on a laptop, who can have the downtime of a train, will make all the difference. We will be looking into that. I'm not sure quite how we could do a proper survey, but anyway, it's a good question and one that's very much on our minds. We're just about out of time. We're going to end promptly at 7. We thank you for being here. Please go to traincampaign.org. We welcome your sponsorship. We welcome your involvement. And we very much hope that we will be able to report good news to you in a year, and we hope we'll be able to be at Bascom Lodge, which, as I said before, opens on July 3rd. And I must say, I'm going to try and get up there at some point this summer. These photographs have really been enticing. Thank you to all of you. Thank you to my fellow panelists, and we'll see you again. We have been recording this, and we'll be posting it. So if you'd like to share it with anyone, and you can certainly go to traincampaign.org. You can reach us anytime. Thanks very much. Good night. Thanks, everyone.